Sharks just need the PR agency that dolphins have because, when you get to know dolphins, they can be pretty nasty.
And if I
When did you personally first get involved with sharks? Like, when did this first become a fascination, and how did it go from becoming a fascination to something bigger?
Well, I've always been fascinated by the oceans as long as I can remember. My shark colleagues will laugh and point fingers at me, but I was always fascinated by dolphins. I just love dolphins, these super social creatures, and through some good luck, happenstance, and throwing a duffel bag on my back and heading off into the unknown, ended up working on dolphins for my PhD. And while I was doing that, I noticed that these animals were not spending a lot of time at the buffet table where there was lots of food, and wondered why they weren't doing that, and noticed that a ton of them had giant scars from where they'd been bitten by sharks.
Really?
So I was like, I'll just read a few papers and probably learn all I need to know about sharks to figure out how they influence dolphins. And found out that we knew virtually nothing at that stage about tiger sharks, which is kind of crazy considering they get to be more than 15 feet long. Okay, you're in Dubai, 4.5 meters, 5 meters long.
I'm American, don't worry.
People live, and they attack people. So how do we not know everything we need to know about where they spend their time and what they eat? And I started studying tiger sharks to learn about dolphins. And that was kind of just down the rabbit hole of, wow, these sharks are incredible. They're challenging to work on, and we know virtually nothing about them compared to a lot of other animals out there. So that kind of got me hooked. And, now we study sharks in my lab, but we're really interested in how important they are for ecosystems, or what would happen if we lost sharks. That means we still have to study the dolphins, the sea turtles, and kind of everything under the sharks to figure out their role in the ecosystem. So I guess I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
That's fair. I think we all are, to a degree. But so what have been the biggest insights that you've found in you're like, okay, I'm going to dive into this world. I'm going to try to figure out how sharks affect things, how everything interacts with sharks, how sharks may be, being at the top of the food chain, how they affect everything else around them. So what have you learned over this time? I know it's probably hard to summarize.
Yeah, well, I think there are a few things. One of the first things that we found that probably surprised a lot of fans of Shark Fest and shark shows is that these are not mindless killing machines. They are not just blasting around eating everything. I mean, those are the kind of exciting events, but they can actually be incredibly boring. And so when you put cameras on the backs of these animals, they spend most of their time swimming. We have cameras on tiger sharks. They turn toward a sea turtle, which is one of their favorite foods. And the turtle lifts its head and looks at the shark, and the shark goes, forget it. And, it doesn't even try to attack because, it knows it has very little chance of getting a meal once it's been seen. I think that was one thing that surprised us. But then the other thing is really just how important a role some of these big species like tiger sharks can play in the ecosystem, and not just because they eat a lot, because they scare a lot of animals. And so it turns out in this place we work in Western Australia, whole huge areas of seagrass are protected from being overgrazed by sea turtles and sea cows, because they are just really kind of too afraid to go in there because it's so dangerous with the sharks. And so we see that sharks can have really important roles in ecosystems, and it doesn't always have to be because they eat a lot. It can be because they scare animals. And I think the final thing, which is really one of the cool things about watching Shark Fest, is you start to see lots more types of sharks. We got 500 species of sharks, and they play different roles and are of different importances in different places. And so I think now we're starting to get to that cool spot of kind of knowing where, when, why, and how sharks can or may be important in ecosystems, but they're all awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so walk me through that a little bit. So, okay, if they protect these lands, does that mainly just create a better space for smaller animals and sea creatures, et cetera?
In the case of seagrasses, it creates a ton, including for people. So, seagrasses are really important for a few reasons. One, they protect the coasts from storms. They stabilize the sediment. They provide homes and kind of nursery habitat for shellfish and fish that grow up to be things that we want to eat. And they're also globally important stores of carbon. And so having healthy big seagrass beds is, one piece of mitigating climate issues. And so kind of for all those reasons, we want to have healthy seagrass. And, if you're a fisher and you want to be catching species that rely on that seagrass, you want to have healthy shark populations around to kind of make sure that the ecosystem's balanced. And I think that the interesting thing as well is that the way some of these big sharks are working in ecosystems is very similar to what we see with like wolves on land. So, big predators wherever we look around the world, when they decline or disappear, bad things happen. And so I think that our thinking from shark conservation now is that we want to switch from just protecting what's left to actually rebuilding populations in a lot of areas because they are in such trouble. And I think that, one of the really neat things in the show we did with Paige Winter, the Paige Winter Story, is, here's somebody who was attacked by a shark, had this life-changing, potentially like a really life-altering event happen, and through it all, a very positive attitude and wants to go out and learn more about sharks and have people understand, these sharks are just they're just doing what big fish do, and you don't blame them for these things, but they are important to have in ecosystems. And so that's one of the things a lot of people are starting to work on now, is trying to figure out how do we have healthy big populations of sharks and then keep people safe in the water as well. So in Australia, where Chris Hemsworth does a documentary this year called Shark Beach, where he goes around, talks to some surfers who have had very close calls, but then works with scientists who are creating, early warning systems or different ways to try to keep people safe. And so I think that's kind of the next horizon as we go from demonizing sharks to saying, okay, they're, we don't want to get rid of them all, to really understanding that we want healthy populations of sharks, but we can find a way to live and use the water with those sharks there.
Okay, before we come back to Paige's story, how do you go about rebuilding shark populations? Like, it's easy just to say, of course, but I'm sure that's just a massive undertaking.
It is a massive undertaking, but at its most basic level, it's not that complicated, which is we just got to stop catching fewer sharks. And we just completed a worldwide survey of reef sharks, which see a good shark place here behind me. This is what shark population should look like in French Polynesia. And it turns out that just making some changes to what gear fishers use can really help. So, getting rid of long lines and gill nets means that you're not catching lots of sharks that you didn't want to catch, and helps their populations kind of, remain. And if we don't catch too many, they can rebuild back to where they were. And we're seeing that here in the US with white shark populations along both the West Coast and the East Coast, that their numbers are starting to rise again. And we're seeing especially more juvenile sharks, which will become bigger sharks. But that's just because we stopped killing too many of them. But what the trick with that is, it's very easy to wag your finger and say, don't catch so many sharks. But the real hard work is working with the communities who are affected by that, because they can be really important to people. And so ecotourism can be an answer in some places, but you got to make sure that the people who are giving up opportunities are the ones who receive benefits when you shift from catching sharks to other industries. So it really, although there's kind of the biology and science of it, at the end of the day, it's really a people issue, and something we need to work with the local communities and local governments on. But we are making progress. There's a lot to do, but I think that the momentum is shifting in the right direction. And if what we think is going to happen happens, which is you have healthy shark populations and you can have healthier fish populations, reefs, seagrasses, then that should benefit people as well. So you can have healthy ecosystems and thriving economies. It's the challenge of how you get there from where we are right now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, people. Yeah. Obviously, the most famously easy to move creatures.
Yeah,
more so than sharks, for sure, of course.
Yeah.
But okay, story time. What exactly happened to Paige? Like, what is Paige's story? Because of course we want people to watch the special, but Let's tantalize people a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's so she and her family and friends were at the beach in North Carolina, and they were waiting. I mean, they were pretty far offshore, probably more than 100 meters offshore, but it's still very shallow. So they were waiting, and just all of a sudden, she felt something grab her.
Mm.
And she did what you should do if grabbed by a shark, which is fight, fight, fight. And that's where she actually tried to grab the shark and pull its jaws off, and that's where she lost a couple fingers trying to do that.
Mm.
And her dad kind of jumped into action, got the shark off her, got her back to shore. They think there might have been two sharks around. And then he provided the first aid that caused things to have a better outcome than they might have. So that really fast, appropriate care made a lot of difference. And then the story is that as she was in the ambulance going to the hospital, she actually told people, "Don't let anybody hurt that shark. It's not the shark's fault." So to me, Paige is just an incredible person with like that, just a wonderful positive outlook on life, and instead of kind of looking for things to blame or the negative, was already thinking about sharks and how people might react to this event. And she ended up losing a big portion of one leg and a couple fingers on one hand, but she's made a recovery. She's now doing her thing, and she kind of wanted to use this opportunity to learn more about sharks herself, but then also help the public understand why she doesn't blame the shark, and why they're important in our ecosystem. So we had the great pleasure taking Paige and her dad out offshore to see sharks and the research we're doing, and it was a really great experience. And I think that the other thing that the things we try to do in the show are kind of go through all the evidence to try to figure out what species attacked Paige, and why did it happen. And I think there's a lot of that. Did we do anything wrong? Something bad happens to us, we want to know, did we do something wrong that caused this to happen? And I think in this case, it's pretty easy to say there's no one thing. Paige has dyed hair, piercings. They were in the water. There's really none of that likely had anything to do, other than being in the water. It didn't have anything to do with her being attacked. And sometimes we're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and in this case, kind of with the wrong shark. It's kind of like you're driving, you can go through a green light and have done everything right, and if somebody runs the red light and hits you, it's just wrong place, wrong time. And I think that's kind of what happened here, because even with big dangerous sharks, I think we'd be really surprised how often those sharks are really, fairly close to people, or no people are there and don't attack. And so it really is a lot more dangerous to drive to the beach than to actually go in the water at the vast majority of places around the country. And that would include North Carolina. So except for some of these places where we know the white sharks are really coming back, and they're there at certain times of the year, you may not want to be in the water at those places and times. But other than that, it's really, not something we should worry about. And I think Paige said it right. She's like, that day I wasn't even thinking about sharks. I was thinking about rip currents. And, really that is the right thing to be thinking about when you're at the beach, because it's usually those kind of environmental things like rip currents or, sun exposure that's going to be most dangerous.
So what are the big mistakes that people usually do make, if we're talking about those mistakes? Like, what are the running the red light sort of things that people can avoid?
Well, when it comes to sharks, there are a few places in the world where you should let the sharks have their space. Reunion Island is an area where there are lots of sharks, and there are shark warnings put up when the conditions are bad. A few areas in the U.S. again where near seal colonies or sea lion colonies where white sharks are feeding, not a good place to be in the water. Other than that, it's things that seem straightforward, like don't swim in areas where people are actively chumming for shark to try to catch sharks. So that you wouldn't think you need to give that advice, but it does happen. And then if you see a lot of bait fish around, you may not want to feed, because sometimes sharks may be darting through those areas and mistake a hand or a foot for a fish. And then you can get down the list of things that are really probably not that dangerous generally, but predators tend to be more active at dawn and dusk. So and being alone may be more risky. So I mean, those are things that if you're worried about it, you can keep in mind. But in most areas, even those aren't really that big of an issue.
Yeah. And okay, you said that she struggled. Is that just a matter of just like flailing your arms? You're supposed to punch her?
Yeah, and actually trying to pry the shark off and kind of hit at it. So I mean, I think that if you're in the extremely unlikely circumstance of being in a shark's mouth, poking at gills, eyes, those kinds of things are you want to fight. And the other thing we see with a lot of these events is that the sharks aren't often biting and then coming back. They're not super tenacious. Usually it's one bite or 10, but then if you get out, they go on their way. In a lot of cases, it may be one bite and they'll release and then they'll swim away because we aren't something they are expecting, or so it's not that big of an issue. And the other thing is, people say when you're swimming, if you see a shark, what should you do? If it's a smaller shark or some of these species that aren't dangerous, enjoy the opportunity to see sharks underwater. A lot of people will pay quite a bit to go to places like French Polynesia, Hawaii to see sharks in their natural habitat. But if it's a bigger species, keep your eye on it and get out of the water. And keeping your eye on it's a key. Very few attacks occur on people that actually see the shark. And when it's like the turtle and the tiger shark I mentioned, if predators know prey has seen them, usually they won't bother because they know they're less likely to be successful. So, but usually tiger sharks, bull sharks, these bigger animals, I prefer to do my work from the boat.
Fair. And you said great whites are coming back too.
Yeah.
There's just none of this applies to great whites. Like if you see a great white,
definitely applies to great whites. I mean, very few people would see oceanic white tips. That's another one I would generally not be in the water with. But bulls, tigers, great whites, oceanic white tips are kind of the top of the list for exit the water or stay in the boat.
Yeah, it's fair. Have you had any close encounters yourself?
I've had the luck of having great close encounters with species I want to have close encounters with, like great hammerheads, reef sharks, bulls and whites from a cage. But the closest when I was in the water was a gray reef shark that decided it wanted my dive fin more than I did. And just was very curious about it. So again, kind of kept my eyes on it, and it was just following and didn't try to bite it or anything. But that's one where you can also read the behavior of these sharks when you get to know them. And some of the camera people that we get to work with on Shark Fest are amazing because they've spent more hours in the water with sharks than just about anybody, probably more than just about anybody in the world. And so you can see when the sharks start arching their back or start getting a little agitated, they might want you out of their space. And so you can take a hint before it gets anywhere. But despite what my mom probably thinks that I am a daredevil, I'm actually a chicken at heart. So I've managed to keep myself in situations that are pretty safe.
Fair. And you said, they were able to apply, really good first aid to make sure she was alive. Is that something that everyone has the knowledge to do? Is that basic, or did that require something really special?
Well, it's, the kind of training that we would get in a basic first aid course, honestly, would cover most of it. I mean, stop the bleeding, immobilize, and activate emergency services as fast as possible. So it does help. Her dad was a paramedic. So, the quality of care would have been as good as you possibly could get. But I mean, it's a reason where any of us who are spending time outside, or, even if we're not, having that basic medical training is worth having. And, the number of years I've been in this field, I know plenty of crews who have had people just have things happen, and the first aid that applied makes a big difference. So I encourage everybody to get that training, sharks or no sharks.
Fair. Good point. And okay, I think we're running out of time, so I should let you go in a minute. But I mean, I did want your opinion because there's been some debate in the community on whether they should even be called shark attacks, whether they should be called shark encounters. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I get the idea that we shouldn't call them shark attacks because we're lumping everything from like small baby sharks nipping somebody, which is kind of like Chihuahua bites you, versus a bull shark like what happened to Paige. You know, it's hard for me to call what happened to Paige an encounter, because to me an encounter is when you go underwater and you have a nice positive interaction, right? Or you know, you see things. So I guess I don't have. I kind of come down in the middle, which is I wouldn't call them attacks when it's little, you know, very non-dangerous species nipping people, but I don't have any problem with them being called attacks when it is a large animal with, you know, life or limb threatening abilities. And I think that by calling them unprovoked versus provoked also kind of helps get to what really happened. And, you know, I'm a biologist, so when we talk about attacks, you know, that's the terminology we use when animals are going after prey. We don't call them, you know, encounters when you see something, attack is when you try to bite it, would be the scientific term. And I think that, you know, the place that's coming from is valid, that, you know, they're trying to demonize these animals, and, you know, the word attack creates an emotional response, but you know, at the same time, these can be dangerous animals and they need our respect. Just like lions and bears, we can love them and still be very respectful of them. And it's, you know, sometimes, yeah, it's probably enough said on that before I get myself in trouble.
Fair.
I guess I don't worry about it too much.
Yeah, but some people do feel very strongly about it. But yeah. I don't want to step on any toes.
And fair enough. I mean, you know, I think that personally, I appreciate the animals for what they are. And again, I think it's kind of funny because Paige, in one interview, you know, she said, I think the shark had almost as bad a day as I did, which is just kind of like, to have that attitude is pretty incredible. But you know, hopefully, you know, shows like the one with Paige help people see that, you know, while there is kind of this big dangerous animal aspect, there's also this amazing important animals piece to them as well. And, you know, that may be the pathway to people wanting to protect them more than worrying about what our terminology is for when bites happen.
True. Yeah, I mean, because ultimately this is what they are. You know, this is what they are as creatures. Like, we don't need to pretend that there's something that they're not. We just need to understand it and be respectful of it.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's, you know, sharks just need the PR agency that dolphins have, because, you know, when you get to know dolphins, they can be pretty, you know, they're amazing, incredible, intelligent animals, but they can be as, you know, violent and, you know, socially aggressive as smart animals can be. but boy, do they have good PR.
They do.
Sharks need some of that.
Except for that one time that they went against George C. Scott and tried to kill the president of the United States back in that Mike.
Yeah, exactly. But they never hold it against them. No.
I think we're the only people that like that movie. But anyhow, it's a great pleasure speaking with you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Take care.
Good to meet you. And hopefully we'll see you here in Florida someday, not too long from now.
Hope so too. Hope there's no sharks around, just personally speaking. But
oh, come on. You know, if you're going to come down, we can take you out to see them here in Florida. We can start with the little baby bull sharks.
Okay, fair. All right, sounds great. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, have a great one.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.